Now, Tara Maller is a former CIA military analyst and senior policy advisor for the Counter-Extremism Project. And with us, my friend, NBC foreign correspondent Ayman Mohyeddin. Ayman, soft targets, Christmas markets, the focus of the attack yesterday, in Turkey, in Ankara. It was an art gallery, not a highly secure environment. We're now seeing the strengthening, the reinforcement of those kinds of soft targets here in the United States. We're at one right now. Is that the reality of how we fight this?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a challenge for security and law enforcement officials going forward for some time to come, because it's not just these soft targets in open public spaces, sideways, people walking, large crowds outside our building here, Rockefeller Center, also shopping malls, big vulnerable targets in the United States. You walk this fine line between civil liberties and personal freedoms as well as the public security. You know, we don't have metal detectors at the doors of our shopping malls. Some people have suggested, well, you need to start doing that. So the question then becomes, well, how much of your public freedom are you going to compromise for the sake of security? And every time we see one of these attacks, you see the needle kind of shift a little bit. You're hearing from public officials in Germany saying we will not compromise on our way of life. We're not going to change our way of life and the things that we like to do, because that's who we are. But at the same time, it shows that we have vulnerabilities, not just in the security of these public places, but also the issue of radicalization and the issue of extremism. This individual, we don't know who he is. And again, as we're hearing from Matt, now that this suspect has been released, or this individual has been released, the identity of who they may be looking for, that's important to understand what kind of attack this is. But given the hallmarks of previous attacks, if this does turn out to be an issue of radicalization and extremism, what we then have to ask ourselves is, when did this radicalization happen, and how do you prevent that from happening again? That is nearly impossible to answer.
Which is a substantially more complicated issue than knowing exactly what happened. Tara, you're very involved in that world of countering violent extremism. The American, you know, we just heard on Andrea Mitchell's show a little while ago, John Kirby from the State Department saying, well, we issued a warning about this, and we issued a warning back in May. But these warnings tend to be very general. Be vigilant when traveling across Europe, or be vigilant when you're in Turkey. How much information do the Europeans, the Americans, the Turks actually have, and how much of that actually gets shared with each other, let alone with the law enforcement and intelligence bodies within a country?
Sure. Well, the State Department warning that was issued, there was actually another one in November. It did actually pick out Christmas time, holiday season, open air markets. It talked about that. Those are not new warnings. Those types of warnings tend to arise around holiday season. However, you've also seen reports and warnings from Homeland Security about truck attacks and knife attacks, because ISIS propaganda and materials of extremist groups have been profiling those types of attacks in their materials and calling on individuals to use trucks and knives.
So Tara, let me
attacks.
just, I'm sorry, I want to go further in this point. So what you're saying is the intelligence is based on the fact that we know that those who go on those websites or who follow what ISIS and other groups like that might be saying, we know that that's what they're recommending that individuals perpetrate. It's not necessarily knowledge of a specific attack.
It's usually both, but the problem with intelligence sometimes on attacks is you can have general strategic intelligence. A group wants to carry out attacks during Christmas time. A group wants to attack open-air markets. A group is planning to do attacks on gatherings of large crowds. You need the actionable time and place. That's usually very specific intelligence. That's usually if you're tracking an individual involved with the attack, or have a tip, from somebody on the inside or that hears about it. That's what you need to thwart the attack prior to the initiation of it. Having said that, our intelligence community is pretty good about knowing a general sense of what types of attacks are upcoming, where they might target. We saw this, I mean, the infamous example of this is the PDB, the President's Daily Brief before September 11th. There wasn't a time and a place, so it wasn't preventable because of the time and place, but there was intelligence about the desire to use airplanes, for example. And I think what you're seeing now is very similar. We know the types of attacks these individuals want to carry out. We know where they want to target. We know where a lot of these cells are. Brussels, high population of radicalized individuals. Paris. But time and place are critical. In the German case, a truck was stolen. There was a window of time from the time the truck was stolen to the attack. Even if we couldn't have prevented the initial start of this attack, I'm curious to see sort of what transpired in that time frame, because that's where something perhaps could have been done to prevent.
What a world we're in, Tara, where a vehicle being stolen elevates to that it gets national security involvement. That is the world we're going to get used to living in. Tara, thanks so much for joining us, and my colleague Ayman Mohyeddin.